You rarely see a source of light when looking at a Thomas Cole painting. I find that surprising. Long shadows and burning sunsets are the signatures of his art style. Light illuminating the bodies of leaves, chiseling contours into a mountain face, igniting clouds, highlighting tiny specks of human. The light isn't ambient, you know where it's coming from. But the source is often just right there? Just a bit to the right or left. But you can't see it. It's hidden. This is Cole's strangest painting, in my opinion. It's called Expulsive, Moon and Firelight. The image is focused on a natural land bridge, his setting for Adam and Eve's expulsion from the Garden of Eden. On the right, a stark golden light indicates an egress into paradise. And on the left, the moon hides half its face from the disgraced sight of fallen humankind. An uncharacteristic, abstract blur of infernal orange in the distance creates the impression of a volcano, perhaps the firelight alluded to in the title. The thin strip of waterfall seems to serve no purpose other than to bisect the bridge to create a natural cross. To me, the rock formation on the left looks vaguely human. Perhaps this earthen being is the only creature to ever see Cole's elusive light source. It and the bridge, of course. Over the Garden Wall is obsessed with shadows. With Thomas Cole, it's always colossal, sweeping vistas with high contrasts and blazing light. But the unknown is pastoral and soothing and meditative. It doesn't create feelings of the sublime or the transcendent. It doesn't threaten to expose you to the terrifying grandeur of God or paradise. Instead, it holds you in night and shade and the dark. What is it about this show? Why are we so mesmerized by it? Why do I seem to have no criticism of it at all, when I can almost always find something to take issue with, even in the art I love? What is so overwhelmingly lovely about Over the Garden Wall that I can't help but see it as a fully realized, perfect piece of art? I have a hard time picking apart its pieces and studying how they work. I feel a need to just observe it. It's not a machine with seams and wiring, it's obsidian. It's whole and opaque and dark and beautiful. It demands to be loved unconditionally. On November 3rd, it'll be 10 years since Over the Garden Wall debuted on Cartoon Network. I've thought a lot about this show in that time. I can't call it perfect. Patrick McHale doesn't seem to think of it as perfect, and I don't even know what perfect means in this case. You can't have a perfect experience with art. Something good will always be lacking. But this show forces me to look beyond that. There's something about shadows and storm clouds and a canopy of trees that makes life in autumn just a bit richer. A kind of haunting feeling that can only accompany the death and the cold and the darkness of autumn. Over the Garden Wall wants you to enjoy the sense of mystery, to face the unknown and brave the change it will create in you. Maybe that's why a Thomas Cole painting is all the more beautiful for the lack of sun. It's not that you can't imagine something more beautiful than the sun, but that the feeling evoked when you can't see the thing you're admiring is simply far more interesting than the object of mystery could ever be. Today, we're not going to pluck out the heart of Over the Garden Wall's mystery. It's where it belongs. It's doing its job. Instead, we're just going to admire it. What strikes me every time I rewatch this show is how complete the darkness of the wood is in the first episode. The dense blackness and blue undertones of the wood don't last the entire series, but it serves as a sufficiently moody introduction to the unknown. The wood is a character in its own right. its personality shifting as the tone does. Or it might be more accurate to say, we see different aspects of the wood personified through the eyes of the boys. When Wirt is afraid, the woods match that impression, becoming tangled, wild, unnavigable. And when he gets used to it, he finds himself on a path, as if the forest was just waiting for him to feel confident enough to tackle it. Greg treats the woods as a playmate, and it finds endless ways to accommodate that expectation. It's a place of endless possibilities, but also a place he can remain safely in control of. There's a reason fairy tales always involve a forest. I grew up in New York City, where children are warned never to enter the wooded areas of parks alone. Trees on a manicured lawn are fine, but once you leave the path, once the trees and the ground and the animals close in to create their own entity, you risk being lost. Of course, this had nothing to do with superstition. There are practical reasons for not letting grid-raised city kids wander into isolated areas. But the effect it's had on me is that I pay attention to the boundaries of cultivation and the wild. When a child enters the wood in a fairy tale, they stray from the safety of the world they know, passing over into a world of risks and consequences. When you spend enough time in a wood, you stop seeing an accumulation of things in an environment and start seeing a holistic world that reacts to you. It's this dreamy space where everything unseen feels like it was designed to make you wonder about it. Over the Garden Wall doesn't want you to understand it. Maybe that's why it's difficult to find its flaws. Any errors somehow indicate some more interesting possibility we don't get to fully understand. Episodic conflicts are resolved not with an amazing revelation that helps the heroes overcome a threat, but by simply dissolving the threat. As soon as the characters observe the danger, it's revealed not to be too dangerous. Of course, that's the theme of the show, but it's also often frustrating. Some episodes even tease you for it, especially The Ringing of the Bell, which is episode 7 of 10, and where the show really wants to spell out how funny it finds its own lack of tension. Greg rattles off about half of a hackneyed Aesop before getting bored with himself.
Oh, for some reason I thought that old lady was the people eater, but it was Lorna all along. It just goes to show you stuff.
And then solves the problem almost by accident. The only real threat the boys had ever faced, Adelaide, was dispatched easily one episode before, and the last confrontation with the episode's antagonist is her telling the boys to beware of Adelaide, whom Wirt and Greg just watched die. It's aggravating, but also too funny to just discount as poor writing. The danger of a wood is often psychological, the lack of knowing. You're never entirely sure where you are, and maybe a small part of you thinks you'll never find a way out. There are beings here who would like it very much if you died, so you'd stop trampling their home underfoot and provide the soil with a tasty snack. And worst of all, what if it gets dark? But if you're watching this video, you've never died in a wood. Chances are you've gotten turned around, felt fear and frustration, but just kept walking until you found your bearings again. The unknown, the dark, the transitory have these emotional qualities that lead to the unique feeling Over the Garden Wall uses to tell its story. That feeling is similar to the phenomenon of the liminal. If you were to rationalize the feelings evoked by this image, or this one, you could come up with something. It's the fear of being alone, the intrigue of something having happened to the people who should be there, the comfort of seeing a space we've all passed through a million times being captured, worthy of nostalgia. But really, all you know in the end is that this feeling, whatever it is worth experiencing, if it's not always pleasant. You can't convey a feeling like this through words. It's practically designed to be indescribable. I wonder if we all have an image with that emotional charge to it. For me, it was always the clouds. Dense, overcast days and foggy nights. It's an image that carries the weight of some indescribably big thing. I guess there was a sense that there was some secret out there or up above, but I never thought about what it was. The mystery felt good to just be in. And I think the sensation of mystery is inevitably linked to our feelings about death. Patrick McHale is kind of a death guy. He co-wrote Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, which is also fixated on portraying death with gravity, but also gentleness and humor. The final note of the film, of death being a necessary reality that makes life worth living, is empowering and inspiring, even though it's also a difficult truth to swallow. By the way, here's the very last shot of that film. Seem familiar? Over the Garden Wall uses death to make its characters feel disempowered. So there's this one line of dialogue that I find really bizarre. It comes in the second episode, Hard Times at Huskenby, when Beatrice asks Wirt what he plans on doing.
Maybe we'll just stay here in Pottsfield. It's nice here. I don't know.
Kid, you can't live with the vegetable-wearing cultists. I forbid it. You're a baby. You need to go home. But he feels this impulse to stagnate. He can't see how to progress. So maybe standing still is just fine. The inability to move forward, experience that which is unknown, is a kind of death. It may be self-imposed, but it sure doesn't feel that way. Many pieces of art will show this lack of motion, the inability to face danger and capture the sense of vitality that goes with it, as a desperately sad, empty state. Part of the charm of Over the Garden Wall is that it takes a different approach. That thing that makes you want to turn on this show as soon as the air gets colder, that desire to curl up on the couch with a dozen apple cider donuts and your favorite cardigan, that is all death. Autumn is death. The cold and the dark is death. Golden leaves and languid old-timey music stuck in time is all death. Some might even say enjoying a cozy show you've seen 100 times is death. But it's wonderful. It's meaningful. Over the Garden Wall seduces you with death, understands the appeal. Periods of stasis, times of rest and meditation, moments where we reflect before action, periodically embracing death can be a good thing. Stillness is the only way to take stock of who and what you are. Making art is often depicted in stories as wild, frantic action, overflowing creation, desperate movement in the fervor to bring the thing to actualization, to salvage the thing from infinity. But it's almost always the other way around, isn't it? Living is fast-paced, observing the world through a moment's lens, getting only moments to understand what's happened to and around you. But when you write or paint or compose, you sit, and everything stops while you isolate the moments that mattered and suspend them in time as long as possible to capture what made them worth creating art about. Over the Garden Wall is obsessed with stagnant transitory periods. This leaf in the second episode has a whole character arc, right up until the moment it's jammed by the wind into a fence. The woodsman wanders a forest indefinitely, even after his temporary shelter is destroyed. The moon hangs half full over every nighttime shot, never waxing or waning, in the same position it's in on the night the boys cross over into the unknown. I won't rehash the Dante's Inferno interpretation of the show. For those not in the know, each episode seems to correspond pretty well with a level of hell in Inferno. But the poem isn't about Dante hanging out in hell for the funsies. It's a place he needs to move through after a solitary stroll took him too far from his intended path. All of hell is just the backdrop of his journey to reunite with his love in heaven. These periods of transition are linked to the physical state of the boys. They're drowning in the process of passing over. But in the passing, there's a moment of suspension between states, and that stillness is what allows Wirt to figure out how to be a big kid, to look out for his little sibling, and ask out a classmate he likes. Over the Garden Wall does eventually choose life over death, however. Solid choice, that. In episode 9, a song playing in Wirt's room foreshadows the revelation at the end of the episode, that Wirt and Greg are drowning to death.
You're sinking like a stone before the tide. The river runs cold. The fight is over.
"The fight is over" was a particularly striking lyric to me. It makes me imagine being on the brink of death in the moments where I realize it's coming, it's inevitable. The next lyric,
Still the haunted ruins of night call your name.
have a sort of redemptive quality. It almost feels cheerful in contrast to the line before. Safety is inherent to this feeling. You rarely get the sense the boys are in any real danger, and without that, the choice to stay wouldn't feel as, choosable. If the story was telling you these boys could genuinely be hacked up by a woodsman at any moment, you wouldn't feel submerged in that golden phonograph languid sensation this show excels at creating. But it's still a story. It needs some danger. The Beast is objectively the most vulnerable character in Over the Garden Wall. A creature of shadows, horns, and tricks, this antagonist is one of the most hair-raising and bone-chilling in all of animation. Yet, we know the woodsman has beaten him in a fight. Subconsciously, I think that's part of what makes him so horrifying. If he's just a mortal, seemingly a knotted amalgamation of Edelwood trees, how powerful is his ability to scheme, manipulate, torment? The danger of the Beast is his silver tongue. In fact, he at one point seems to delude the woodsman so severely that he both knows and simultaneously does not know that lost souls are where the Edelwood trees come from. Like, check this out.
Don't you care about keeping the lantern lit? Don't you care about your daughter's soul?
One cannot trade the souls of children as if they were tokens.
Followed by this revelation in the finale.
No, I won't do this.
You've been grinding up lost souls for years.
I didn't know. I didn't know this is where the Edelwood trees came from.
No, you knew. You definitely knew. The Beast doesn't just feed off fear, he thrives off delusion. The simplicity of the Beast as a design stands out to me as a singularly excellent choice for animation. The imagination fills everything in the black void of his body until the very moment he's exposed for the fragile creature he is. He blends into the trees, and that makes it very effective when he slides into frame, or we suddenly notice him after our eyes take a second to adjust. The Beast works slowly, meticulously, creeping up from the edge of the unknown before you even realize he'd been laying plans. That's real fear, I think. Something that seems like just a part of the environment, suddenly catching your attention, eating all your time, all your care, and capacity for movement. In the end, the Beast is beaten with a change of perspective.
Well then, perhaps we better make a deal. Take on the task of lantern bearer, or watch your brother perish.
Wait, that's dumb.
Wirt is in the middle of getting Greg out of the Edelwood, and the Beast is still almost able to manipulate him. He has nothing to offer. The threat, like in every other episode, is empty. I can't stop thinking about this bridge. It's practically glowing, each contour carefully rendered to accentuate the intensity of the light. The walkway between, ostensibly, the profane and the pure, the corporeal and the infinite. Wirt and Greg have their own bridge of sorts. Of course, it's not a magnificent boulder precariously balanced on rock pillars and covered in blinding light. That's not this show's style. But at the end of episode 1, they have to hop over a few stones to cross a creek in the dark wood. I assume this was done as an extension of the Inferno illusion. The first circle of hell isn't considered hell proper. It's a place called Limbo, where unbaptized babies and Socrates go. Inferno's a really weird poem, okay? And so, crossing over the bridge signifies a conscious, informed movement into the lands of death. It's a strangely casual scene, but the crossing is so quietly moving to me. Watching the kids walk away in a direction that is definitely not north, with the branches and leaves forming a nestling vignette effect around them, is really powerful. The journey is cold and rough, it's life and death, but I'm glad to see these kids are in the arms of a forest that seems to want to nurture them, protect them, and eventually set them back on the right path toward life. There's danger, yes, but without the danger, there could be no chance of growth. The unknown isn't inherently scary. It's a holding space that forces us to pause, think, and return to the source of fear renewed, rested, and emboldened. The urge to move forward, always tackling the next project, the next stage of life, the next obstacle, leads to stasis anyway. Every moment spent in a depressed haze or feeling ennui and pain and just needing to lie down and do nothing can feel like an empty chasm inside of me. I must be empty, broken, hollow, somewhat dead, really. But somewhat dead is apparently okay. Useful, even, as long as it stays somewhat. The beauty of Over the Garden Wall's stuck-in-time-ness is that it feels natural. Nice, even. This ferry ride seems downright pleasant. This bar seems like a cool place to spend an evening. I'd shuck so much corn at this husking bee. I want to pet these albino peacocks. I wouldn't want to spend 2 seconds in this house, but I would love to befriend a barrel of turtles.
Turtles!
I never thought I could have such weirdly positive feelings about the moments of stasis and depression, and certainly not death. The bridge from one world to another is pretty sturdy, actually. You can come back. If paradise isn't something you need anymore, if you've made a decision and want to take action, it's okay. Just turn right around and cross back into the world of the living. Whenever you're ready.